Before we get started, let's have a look to the rig. By default, the character is presented with a matte cap and a preview of the texture. You can enter material preview mode to see the robot at its best, but you should stay in solid mode for animation performances. By default, you should have access to the different rig layers. If it's not the case, open the text editor. You should have the script open. If it's not the case, select it in the list and press the play button. Then select the rig and go into pose mode. The first thing to check is this eye icon. It's a bone that holds some custom properties. The bevel option allows us to re-enable the bevel modifier that is on the robot. It will make it look a little better, but it will also increase the number of polygons, hence reducing the performances. Activating the bevel modifier tends to triple the number of polygons. Enabling the subdiv option will enable the subdivision modifier on the robot, increasing the number of faces to almost 1 million. So it will largely slow down your computer performances. If I press the spacebar and try to play the animation, even if our robot is not animated, you can see the number of frames per second dropping. Note that those options only affect the viewport display. You don't need to re-enable them if you want to render your animation. Getting back onto this view property bone, you can see that there are options to mask the artillery piece, the legs, and both the minigun and the rocket launcher, just as we had on the squirrel character, allowing us to focus on specific part of the character. Next to this bone, we have another one that is our properties bone. It includes a lot of different properties, but they almost all do the same thing. The first ones allow us to switch between forward kinematic and inverse kinematic for the right leg or the left leg. By default, they are set to inverse kinematic. Moving the inverse kinematic controller will allow us to animate the whole leg, exactly as we did with our squirrel character. If we change the value to 0, now the leg is moving in another position. It will now follow the forward kinematic controllers that we can access by activating the forward kinematic layer. Now the leg is moving using forward kinematic and we can control each segment separately. We will be mostly animating using inverse kinematic, so you can switch it back. The next properties allow us to enable or disable the rotation follow of the different parts of the robot. By default, the arms are following the orientation of the body, but if I disable this follow rotation, you can see that now they stay horizontal. They don't follow the rotation of the body anymore. You will find the same option for the artillery piece and the head of the robot. By default, the follow rotation is disabled, but if I re-enable the follow head rotation, you can see that now the head is leaning forward and is aligned with the body. The follow leg rotation will only affect the leg behavior whenever you are using forward kinematic. This is pretty common when using forward kinematic for the arms or the leg to isolate their rotation from the hips rotation or the shoulder rotation. The next option, minigun speed, will allow us to set the speed of rotation of the minigun cannon so that we don't need to animate the rotation of the barrels. The minigun follow and the sensor follow allow us to isolate the targets from both those items. The minigun and the sensor will follow their own target, and by default, those targets are parented to the body of the robot. If we disable or set to 0 the value of the follow option, the targets are no longer following the motion of the body, and so you can see the minigun adjusting its orientation toward the aiming point. And so does the sensor on top of the robot. The controllers of the robot are pretty straightforward. The root bone allows us to move the whole robot, the torso root allows us to move the whole body, Then you will find controllers for the different parts. Hold targets for the legs, IK controllers, allowing to move and rotate the feet. On the back of the foot you will find a very useful controller that allows us to perform steps or rotation around the ball and the heel of the foot. When you rotate it from the front view or on its z-axis, you will get a nice contacting left to right motion. Both arms have controller. The rocket launcher has a door opening controller. Each body part has a separate controller as on the body of the squirrel character. Each rocket has its own controller that allow us to move them in space at will, and they also have a secondary controller that allow us by a simple one-axis rotation to deploy the wings of those rockets. The antennas have a simple one-axis rotation control. The artillery has a first controller that allows us to create the recoil motion. And we also have an hydraulic controller that allows us a bit of up and down motion and also to slightly rotate the artillery back and forth. So it's a pretty simple yet versatile rig. Let's animate this beast.